I had to take the PICadillo project apart again. I had missed 2 wires on the breadboard, so the output keying transistor was not connected to the output jack. So I thought I'd try to show a little bit of the hardware as it goes together. I was hoping that this movie recording would have a pause button, but I don't see one, so I will probably try to see if I can get Michael to paste a few shorter videos together. Anyway, this is the board. The PICadillo, you can see, is plugged in to the breadboard, and for all the many I/O connections to pots and switches and jacks, there's headers along the top and the bottom, and so once it's inside the enclosure, the cables connect to it. So it's a real mess once you get it all inside. From this view, the PICadillo is plugged into sockets in that central portion. The hypermite filter for producing the high quality tone is there, and the input buffer circuit for the analog input to the decoder plugs in there. So that needs to be bolted back into the enclosure. So I'll be sticking it in from this side, and then attach all of the cables that are wired to things on this part of the enclosure. And once that's all tucked in as best as possible, then the real messy part will have to be hooked up. This is the back section with the speaker, all the I/O connectors, and the long-term temporary LCD as I migrate display functions from the LCD to the TFT display. And it gets a little hard to plug this thing in, so I won't attempt to show and waste the time of trying to put it all together, but we'll take a few more little short videos along the way and see if maybe I can produce a final one. I've done the first stage of the process of putting it back together. Let me see if lighting here will help any. Yeah, I don't think that helps much at all, so I'll get rid of that. And so I've got the breadboard assembly back inside, attached to the front panel, and I've got all of the cables for this section attached. See if I can get a closer view of some of this. Don't know if the autofocus will work well enough, and probably going to be a little difficult. I attempt to, yeah, it's not going to work very well. Yeah, the back section just fell down. Let me attempt to bring it into focus manually if I can. And oh, I didn't have it on autofocus. That's part of it. Okay, so I've attempted to identify each section where a cable gets plugged in with labels on both the cable and next to the header strips, and put black dots on things to try to help me keep track of which end of the cable is the ground in, and just to try to avoid confusion. It can be pretty hard. I've got the autofocus on there, so working a little bit. So I've got labels up on that side too. You can see one of them where I think it was over here somewhere. Let me find it. ICW volume. Yeah, it's in there. So that one, the plug-on cable was labeled ICW volume, and up on the chassis above there it says ICW volume. So it helps me to try to keep things arranged so that I don't plug cables on incorrectly. But now when I get to the bottom section, okay, still got autofocus on, and yeah, it's working a little bit. So when I start trying to plug the cables into the top and the bottom that come from this back section, which with the LCD is rather unbalanced. So when I start positioning that around to try to get all of these many cables plugged in where they go, it gets a little bit difficult because you can see when they get close enough together to plug in, there's less room to work in there. So that will be the next stage, and hopefully when I have it back together, it will still be functioning. Okay, I got it put back together. It was rather difficult, harder than the first few times. Certainly I'll need to take it apart again at some point for something I've missed or overlooked. And I think I will have to splice some of the cables to make them a little longer, make it easier to hook up. Since I mentioned the cables, I'll attempt to show these. These are really low-cost cables from China, and a fixed length. So the only ones I have spliced in there are the one to the piezo speaker, since the piezo has wires coming out, and had to splice to them, and then the ones for extending this alternate LCD display out here. So I'm going to turn it on now. I've already turned it on to make sure that none of the cables had been misplaced or got pulled off in the process. I can't get good lighting for the display here, but there it came up. The LCD, of course, still has all the original stuff on it. The TFT only has that top line, and maybe I've got some features migrated to the second line. I can't remember so far. And then the text starts off at the bottom. So right now I have the piezo switched on. So I'll turn it off, and now you won't hear anything. And I'll turn on the internal speaker. And the external speaker. In the rig, I'll set it to tune. That's an external side tone oscillator, just for testing the rig keying output. And now turn on the rig keying. So that's all those things are functional. I've got a loopback cable in the back so that I can adjust the side tone volume here normally. If I adjust that, let me turn the ICW volume and the drive all the way down. So now the mixer in the amplifier stage will only have input from the side tone. So turn the side tone down where I can just barely hear it right now. I don't think it'll be heard in the video. Now, if I turn the ICW volume up, normally this is for the received audio coming from the sound card and mumble, but still nothing heard because I've got the loopback cable, so that the drive, the output that normally goes to the sound card, is just coming back into the input. So that shows me that the drive is working, and that this input to the mixer is working, and that input is working. So it gives me a pretty good test for the audio section. There's a reset button on top here, so that resets, and it's now starting off from scratch. There's a speed control pot on top for the paddle speed. Right now it's all the way turned counterclockwise, so the paddle speed is controlled by the PS2 keys, like so. But if one's using it without a PS2 keyboard, just like the other keys, the other PIC32, the other chip kit keyers. You can also use the spot. When you turn it up off of minimum, it starts taking control. And now if I try to change speed with the paddle, it tells me set the paddle pot full counterclockwise. So it's just a reminder that the pot is in control right now. And that's an example of a message that shows up on the LCD but not on the TFT. So I have lots of things like that. I'm going to turn the pot back down because I'm used to that. Not using that. 15 is the lowest. If you turn it down too rapidly, it only gets pulled occasionally, so you don't end up at the 15. Maximum is 49 if I go fairly slow at the end, so that's maximum. If I turn it down real quickly, I've shown this in some of the video, it won't necessarily get down to the 15, but I don't consider that a problem. And now the keyboard arrow keys can control it, and of course as long as I send on the paddle, the focus for the arrow keys is the paddle. That's what the equal sign means there. If I now hit a key on the keyboard, the focus will change and you'll see the equal sign jump over to the keyboard speed. And now the focus for the arrow keys is the keyboard. The ID timer is running away there. If I send my call, ID resets, and then of course the buffer count up there. So all of these features are pretty much things that have already been demonstrated before and exist in other keyers. But I still have a lot of checking to do to look for little strange anomalies that I haven't picked up yet in the new software. And as I've indicated, a lot of things to add on the TFT display. For instance, the side tone, I don't have the set of keys labeled, but I think there. So now the side tone frequency has the focus, and I can adjust it in steps of 5 or 1. Not that you really need 1, but the default in the non-volatile memory at startup is 620. And now if I send on the paddle, the focus does not go back because I found for things like particularly weight and compensation, I currently use compensation instead of weight. I want the focus to stay there even if I'm sending. So none of that showed up on the TFT. So there are many display functions that still need to be handled. And before I forget, I'm going to get the compensation back down to my default, which I have not yet stored in EEPROM. And as possible, I could have a problem with some of these things, but I won't go into those right now. I might not have initialized everything in this EEPROM yet, and if I tried to do it while taking a video, it surely wouldn't work, and I'd be stumbling around. So the main objective here was just to show the final assembly after the stages of putting it together. So now the back has all cables except for the headphone. I'll need to recheck that that one's still working. So yeah, every jack on there has now been tested after putting it back together except for the headphone. So I will do that before I forget after stopping this video.